Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, our mission is, well, I think it's pretty straightforward. We're taking a really deep, comprehensive look at the life and the, frankly, staggering cultural impact of George Harrison.
Hmm.
We're going to try and move past that simple, often really misleading label of the quiet Beatle.
It's so reductive, isn't it?
It is. We want to explore his revolutionary contributions as a musician, a spiritual seeker, and, something people often forget, an expert film producer.
You absolutely have to challenge that quiet Beatle label. I mean, when you actually stack up his achievements, the sheer volume of his songwriting, the whole Handmade Films catalog, his media post-Beatles success,
Right.
and his spiritual advocacy, he was, without a doubt, one of the most proactive and culturally transformative figures of the last half of the 20th century. We're looking at an architect, someone who didn't just play in the band, he actually redefined the philosophical and, the instrumental boundaries of popular music.
Okay, so let's establish the scope of that. At his core, George Harrison was a musician, a masterful singer, a songwriter, yes,
Of course.
and a prolific music and film producer. But the thing that really separates him, the seismic shift he brought to pop music, was his deep, profound incorporation of Indian instrumentation and Hindu-aligned spirituality into the Western mainstream.
And this wasn't just a fad for him. This was a revolution driven by genuine belief.
Exactly.
And, the roots of that revolution, they go back before he even picked up a guitar. George was born February 25, 1943, in Liverpool, youngest of 4 kids. And the atmosphere his mother, Louise, created is just so revealing. She was this exuberant, music-loving woman, always singing loudly around the house. But here's the fascinating detail.
This is the part I love.
Right. While she was pregnant with George, she made a point of listening to this weekly broadcast called Radio India, and her specific hope was that the, quote, exotic music would bring peace and calm to her unborn child.
I mean, that's the ultimate foreshadowing, isn't it?
Yeah.
His mother, years before the Beatles even existed, was unknowingly priming him for the sitar, for all that Eastern influence.
It's incredible.
His first musical interests were a bit closer to home, though. He was drawn to English performers like George Formby, the jazz genius Django Reinhardt. But his real rock and roll epiphany, as the sources call it, that happened in early 1956.
He was just riding his bicycle past a house in Liverpool, and he heard Elvis Presley's Heartbreak Hotel.
And that was it.
That was it. That raw sound, that energy, it just completely captivated him. He said he was totally into guitars from that moment on. And his mother, seeing this passion, she supported it completely. She helped him buy his first guitar. An inexpensive one, but so significant.
Right. It cost about what would be 110 pounds today.
And by age 14, he's not just obsessed, he's getting good. He's learning songs from a friend of his father's, getting into those rockabilly and country sounds of Carl Perkins and Lonnie Donegan. And that's really what established his solid, country-tinged rhythm style that you hear all over the early Beatles stuff.
Before we jump into the band, because that's where his story usually starts, it's so important to tease the other paths he carved out.
Absolutely. We reduce him to a band member, but his later identity, he co-founds Handmade Films, a major production company, by mortgaging his own magnificent estate, Friar Park, just to fund Monty Python's Life of Brian.
Incredible.
And maybe most historically significant, he organizes the concert for Bangladesh in 1971. He basically creates the blueprint for the modern celebrity charity rock show. This guy was many things, but quiet just wasn't one of them.
That obsession with rock and roll, it pretty quickly led him to the early Beatles. He met Paul McCartney on the school bus, they lived near each other, bonded over music. And Paul's the one who suggested George audition for John Lennon and the Quarrymen in March 1958.
And that story, the anecdote about how he got in, it really highlights the power dynamic of the early band, doesn't it? Lennon initially just dismissed him, thought the 15-year-old was just too young to keep up.
He thought he was just a kid.
Exactly. The sources detail this slightly awkward but decisive moment where Harrison basically had to prove himself on pure technical skill. He had to show he was way beyond his years.
So Paul arranges a second meeting. And there, on the upper deck of a Liverpool bus, in all places, Harrison plays the lead guitar part for the instrumental Raunchy.
And that specific performance showing he knew this complex, influential rockabilly piece that sealed the deal, he was in. It shows that even though Lennon saw him as a disciple, Harrison was a skilled, professional-level guitarist from the very start.
It's a crucial distinction. Now let's talk about that famous, really misleading nickname, the Quiet Beatle.
Ah, yes. Our sources confirm the origin is wonderfully anticlimactic. It's totally circumstantial. It had nothing to do with him being shy or introverted.
Not at all. When the Beatles first landed in the United States, February 1964, for their big debut, George was really sick.
He had strep throat, a high fever.
Yeah, and his doctor basically ordered him to limit all unnecessary speaking until after the Ed Sullivan Show performance.
Hmm.
So the press, seeing him being reluctant to talk during all those chaotic appearances, they just labeled him laconic.
And the nickname, born from a medical necessity, it just stuck instantly. Much to his, wry amusement later in life.
It became this identity just forced on him by circumstance, not by his actual character. And as the band matured, so did his contributions. His songwriting, though, it started pretty tentatively.
His very first solo writing credit was Don't Bother Me, which is on the 1963 album with the Beatles.
And he recalled writing that song while he was sick in bed in the hotel. He saw it mostly as an exercise, just to see if he could write a song.
But even that early attempt, it showed his instinct for unusual sounds, right? The track's written almost entirely in the Dorian mode, which gives it this exotic, minor key feel that really hints at the deeper musical explorations that were coming later.
That interest just explodes in 1965. By the time they're recording Rubber Soul, Harrison is acting as this crucial creative pivot for the whole band.
He really is. He spearheads two massive genre shifts. First, he pulls the band towards folk rock, influenced heavily by Bob Dylan and the Byrds.
Wow.
And second, he introduces Indian classical music to the Western pop world with his use of the sitar on John Lennon's Norwegian Wood.
He called Rubber Soul his favorite Beatles album, and that sitar moment, which he said he just played initially to suggest a drone, it was seismic. It was the flashpoint. It started what Ravi Shankar later called the great sitar explosion in rock music. Harrison is universally credited for that.
And his commitment wasn't casual, it was academic. After he personally met the sitar maestro Ravi Shankar in London in June of '66, Harrison asked to become his formal student.
And Shankar accepted, recognizing this was his sincere desire to learn.
It really was. That same year, right after the Beatles' final tour, Harrison traveled to India for 6 weeks.
He started his study in Bombay, but, having a Beatle there was just too distracting.
Totally. So he had to retreat completely. He moved to a secluded houseboat on a remote lake in Kashmir to continue his intensive sitar study in private. This was a serious, disciplined pursuit of knowledge. It went way beyond simple cultural appropriation.
You see the results of that immersion immediately on Revolver in 1966. He contributes 3 compositions. The opener, the politically sharp Taxman,
Great track.
I Want to Tell You, and the real landmark, Love You Too.
Love You Too is the key here. The sources describe it as the Beatles' first genuine full immersion into Indian music. It's got sitar, tabla, a complete embrace of Hindustani classical structure.
And it was so pivotal because it set this critical precedent in pop music for a respectful, detailed, and non-parodying representation of Asian musical culture. It emphasized the philosophy over just the novelty of the sound.
And that commitment just got deeper. By the time of Steep My Peppers in '67, his only contribution, Within You, Without You, was a fully formed Indian-inspired piece.
It used sitar, tambura, and musicians from the London Asian Music Circle playing instruments like the daruba and the swarmandal. And, crucially, no other Beatle played on the track.
Right, which really emphasizes that creative divergence. He was charting a completely independent course, spiritually and musically, while still being a full member of the band.
And later, looking back on Sprayed Pepper, he said it was both a millstone and a milestone. A milestone for its innovation, but maybe a creative millstone for him personally.
Because his vision was so often restricted to just 1 or 2 tracks per album.
Exactly. What's so fascinating is that while he's diving deep into Eastern concepts, he's also evolving his rock songwriting. This is where Bob Dylan and the band become critical in late '68.
Harrison visited Dylan in Woodstock, and he was just so drawn to band's ethos of communal, supportive music making.
Which was the complete opposite of what he was experiencing.
It stood in stark contrast to the stifling Lennon-McCartney dominance he felt trapped by in the Beatles.
And that feeling of being creatively caged, it led to this explosion of material. This period of frustration was also his most prolific writing phase.
Which culminates in his masterful contributions to Abbey Road in 1969. Here Comes the Sun and Something. He had finally, undeniably achieved equal songwriting status.
Something, in particular, is just iconic. It was his first A-side single for the band, a worldwide chart topper. And its quality is proven by Frank Sinatra, of all people, calling it the greatest love song of the past 50 years.
And it's still the Beatles' second most covered song, only after Yesterday. Even John Lennon said it was the best song on the album. I mean, that level of validation, after years of creative restriction, must have been overwhelming.
It was undeniable proof. But by the time of his final session with the band in early 1970, that frustration had become irreversible. The limitation of only 2 or 3 songs per album had created this immense stockpile of unreleased, high-quality compositions.
And that immense stockpile didn't just lead to an album. It led to one of the most remarkable and really artistically daring debuts of the whole post-Beatles era, the triple album, All Things Must Pass, in 1970.
A triple album. I mean, it wasn't just 2 discs of songs. There was a 3rd disc of just extended jams with his friends, the Apple Jam. The sheer audacity and the volume of it was a direct statement that he had been holding back monumental material for years.
Oh, for sure. The release topped charts everywhere, and it instantly established his signature solo identity.
And the sound was just massive.
It really was. The album was co-produced by Phil Spector using his famous wall of sound technique. So you have this heavy reverb, lush orchestration, dense layering of instruments. It created this sort of sonic cathedral for Harrison's songs.
And the lineup of musicians was stellar. Eric Clapton, Ringo Starr, Billy Preston.
Members of Delaney and Bonnie's band, critics got it. Ben Gerson of Rolling Stone described it as being Wagnerian, Brucknerian, the music of mountaintops and vast horizons.
That sounds absolutely enormous. The album gave him his biggest hit single, the spiritually charged My Sweet Lord, and critically, it cemented his trademark instrument for the rest of his career, the slide guitar.
A technique he had only just picked up while he was briefly touring with Delaney and Bonnie and Friends in late 1969.
And that introduction to slide was truly transformational for him.
It was. The slide guitar let him effortlessly blend his spiritual identity with his musical one. By moving that metallic slide, he could mimic the sustained, vocal-like tones of traditional Indian instruments like the bowed sarangi and the dilruba. It created a signature sound that was instantly recognizable and just profoundly unique in rock music.
But the massive success of this spiritual album also brought an unexpected and very material shadow: the 1976 legal loss over My Sweet Lord.
A really painful affair. Bright Tunes Music sued him, claiming the melody was too similar to the 1963 hit He's So Fine by the Chiffons.
And he denied any deliberate copying, right? He said the melody just came to him.
He did, emphatically. But the judge ultimately ruled that while he hadn't intentionally copied the song, he was guilty of subconscious plagiarism. It was a crippling financial and emotional blow for him. It just reinforced his skepticism towards the music business and, the material world.
Moving from that individual creative pain to this act of massive compassion, 1971 saw one of the defining moments of his life, the concert for Bangladesh.
This huge event was organized at the direct request of Ravi Shankar, who was urgently seeking aid for the starving refugees of the Bangladesh Liberation War.
And Harrison just took up the mantle with incredible energy. His primary goal wasn't even just fundraising. He said it was to attract attention to the situation. He understood celebrity power could force global media awareness.
And the event was at Madison Square Garden. Over 40,000 people across 2 shows and a historic lineup. Bob Dylan's first major concert in years, Ringo Starr, Leon Russell, Eric Clapton,
who was battling a heroin addiction at the time. A colossal undertaking.
They released pop music's first charity single, Bangladesh, immediately raising awareness. And the triple live album that came out of it, The Concert for Bangladesh, went on to win the Grammy for Album of the Year in 1973.
Its legacy is just monumental.
It is. I mean, it generated about $13.5 million, but the funds were initially delayed for a decade because of tax issues, a serious blunder by his business manager, Alan Klein, who failed to properly register it as a UNICEF benefit. But despite that financial holdup, the cultural impact was immediate and long-lasting. It fundamentally created the template, the structure, the celebrity appeal, the live album for every major charity rock show that came after it, from Band Aid to Live Aid.
Looking at the mid-70s, his albums really reflected his increasing spiritual focus, sometimes, at the expense of accessibility. His 73 album, Living in the Material World, was a huge commercial success, though.
Oh, yeah. #1 for 5 weeks. It produced the U.S. #1 single, Give Me Love, Give Me Peace on Earth.
But that album was just saturated with Hindu concepts, and critics were split. Some praised it as profoundly seductive, a unique article of faith. Others, though, started to find his work a bit too didactic, maybe even sanctimonious. They criticized his tendency to preach.
And that critique really came to a head during his 1974 Dark Horse tour. This was his first North American tour as an ex-Beatle, and it featured Billy Preston and, controversially, a huge segment dedicated to traditional Indian music led by Ravi Shankar.
And the tour was a critical disaster.
It really was. Fans who were expecting a Beatles hit show were often affronted by the lengthy Indian music sets and Harrison's onstage sermonizing about God and philosophy.
And to make matters worse, he was battling severe laryngitis, which led critics to infamously dub it the Dark Horse Tour.
That's rough. But it highlights the clash between his artistic vision and what the audience expected. He wasn't giving them nostalgia, he was giving them his spiritual truth. And, while many reviews were negative, some people there did see it as a groundbreaking presentation of serious non-Western music in a major rock context.
It was an uncompromised artistic stand, for sure.
And that spiritual journey was just non-negotiable for him, regardless of what the critics said. Harrison was a lifelong advocate of the teachings of Swami Vivekananda, and especially Paramahansa Yogananda, the author of Autobiography of a Yogi.
And his commitment to the Hare Krishna movement was tangible and deeply practical. In '69, he produced the hit single Hare Krishna mantra for the London devotees.
And even more significantly, in 1972, he donated his sprawling Letchmore Heath mansion and its 17 acres of land to the movement. It was renamed Bhaktivedanta Manor. I mean, that's an immense act of spiritual dedication.
He was a serious practitioner. He embraced the discipline of japa yoga, which is the meditative chanting of mantras with prayer beads. This is the discipline that connects the individual to the divine.
And his philosophical understanding is just perfectly captured in his chariot analogy.
That analogy, it so perfectly illustrates his struggle with fame and the material world.
Yeah, he explained that the body is like a chariot, and the 5 senses are the 5 horses pulling it. If you let the senses, the horses run wild, the chariot will crash. So you need Christ or Krishna or Buddha or whichever of our spiritual guides to drive the chariot, asserting spiritual control over physical desire. It's a disciplined effort to impose inner order on outer chaos.
And that discipline extended to his lifestyle. In keeping with his Hindu yoga traditions, Harrison became a committed vegetarian from the late 1960s onward, and he stuck with it for religious reasons his entire life.
So following that intense, highly spiritual, but commercially inconsistent period of the mid to late 70s, which saw some low-performing albums like Gone Troppo in '82, Harrison engineered this massive commercial return in the late 80s.
The comeback album, Cloud 9, 1987. It was co-produced with Jeff Lynne of ELO, a brilliant choice. Lynne was known for his melodic sensibilities in creating these big, polished commercial sounds.
Lynne was exactly the right partner to bring Harrison's melodic gifts back to the mainstream. Cloud 9 yielded the global smash Got My Mind Set on You, which became a U.S. #1. It just signaled this profound resurgence for him after nearly 5 years away from the spotlight.
This successful return to music wasn't the only area where he was innovating, though. His influence in film production just completely shreds any trace of that quiet Beatle stereotype. He became a vital figure in sustaining the entire British film industry during a lean period.
The origin story of Handmade Films is legendary. He co-founded it with his business partner, Dennis O'Brien, in 1978. And the motivation wasn't profit, it was friendship. It was a desire to see art get made. Specifically, they wanted to produce Monty Python's Life of Brian.
Right. They stepped in because EMI Films, the original backer, pulled out just days before production was set to start. Their chief executive read the scripts and just thought it was too controversial.
So Harrison, faced with his friends not being able to make their movie, just put up the entire production cost himself.
By mortgaging his home, Friar Park.
Famously, Eric Idle later immortalized it, saying Harrison had paid the most anybody's ever paid for a cinema ticket in history. It was an act of pure, financially reckless idealism, and it paid off immediately.
That cinema ticket earned $21 million at the U.S. box office alone. And Harrison went on to be executive producer for 23 films through Handmade.
We're talking about massive hits like the fantasy adventure Time Bandits in 1981, as well as the critically acclaimed Mona Lisa and the cult classic Withnail and I. His role was crucial. He was credited with helping to stabilize and sustain the British film industry during a period of real financial insecurity.
But again, that chaos of the material world intruded. While Handmade produced these classics, the business began to suffer in the late 80s due to some box office flops and significant debt incurred by O'Brien.
And the aftermath was brutal. Harrison eventually sued O'Brien for fraud and negligence, winning a highly publicized $11.6 million judgment in 1996. This sequence, great spiritual impulse leading to extraordinary creative success, followed by betrayal and entanglement and ugly material legal battles, that's a profound theme that runs through his whole adult life.
Let's pivot back to music. The late 80s, which brought one of the most organic and just unexpected creative alliances in rock history, the Traveling Wilburys.
The formation of this platinum-selling supergroup was, quite literally, an accident. In 1988, Harrison, Jeff Lynne, Roy Orbison, Bob Dylan, and Tom Petty all gather in Bob Dylan's garage studio to record a single track.
Harrison just needed a B-side for a European single.
Exactly. And the song they recorded, Handle with Care, was so good that his record company recognized it was way too strong for a B-side, and they demanded a full album.
So under the guise of being these related half-brothers, all named Wilbury, the group recorded Traveling Wilburys Volume 1. Harrison adopted the pseudonym Nelson Wilbury for the first album, and then Spike Wilbury for the second.
Their whole project was just marked by this easy collaboration and playful wit. After the tragic death of Roy Orbison in late '88, the remaining four recorded a second album in 1990, which they deliberately titled Traveling Wilburys Volume 3.
Which was Harrison's idea, wasn't it?
It was. Jeff Lynne confirmed it. He said, let's confuse the buggers. It's a perfect example of his dry, self-effacing humor, and it's also worth noting this supergroup, despite its immense success, never performed live.
In the mid-90s, Harrison returned to his original bandmates for the Beatles anthology project. This saw him, McCartney, and Starr reuniting with producer Jeff Lynne to finish two incomplete John Lennon demos, Free as a Bird and Real Love.
It was a monumental, painstaking task, his final collaboration with the surviving members of the Beatles. But the process was complicated. When they tried a third Lennon song, Now and Then, Harrison immediately objected. He found the audio quality of Lennon's cassette demo completely unacceptable, and he vetoed its completion.
Declaring the raw track fucking rubbish.
Exactly, a blunt assessment that perfectly encapsulates his creative standards and his honesty.
Now we have to turn to his final years, which were marked by immense physical challenges, starting with health issues related to his past.
Soon after the anthology sessions, Harrison was diagnosed with throat cancer, which he publicly attributed to years of smoking. He received treatment, but his health was severely compromised when, in 1999, he faced a truly life-threatening encounter.
This was the horrific knife attack at his Friar Park estate on December 30th, 1999. A 34-year-old paranoid schizophrenic, Michael Abram, broke in and violently attacked him with the kitchen knife. Harrison fought back fiercely, but he sustained over 40 stab wounds and a punctured lung.
His wife, Olivia, saved his life. She intervened and physically struck the intruder repeatedly with a heavy fireplace poker and a lamp until Abram was subdued. Harrison later recalled the moment vividly, thinking he'd been fatally stabbed. He said, "I could hear my lung exhaling and had blood in my mouth."
Wow. And his philosophical response in the aftermath was just so profound. He quoted the 8th century Indian sage Adi Shankara saying, "Life is fragile like a raindrop on a lotus leaf, and you'd better believe it."
Tragically, his close circle, including McCartney, later said they believed the severe trauma of that attack likely triggered the return and spread of his cancer. The wounds and the emotional shock were just immense.
Again, cancer had metastasized, which led to treatment in Switzerland and later New York. His dry wit, though, it remained intact to the very end.
Ringo Starr visited him in New York, and when Ringo had to leave abruptly because his own daughter needed emergency brain surgery, Harrison, despite being so frail and weak, quipped, "Do you want me to come with you?"
He died on November 29, 2001, at the age of 58, at a property in Los Angeles belonging to Paul McCartney. He was surrounded by his family and Hare Krishna devotees who were chanting verses from the Bhagavad Gita as he passed.
And his final communicated message, relayed by his family, it just beautifully synthesized his entire life's philosophy. Everything else can wait, but the search for God cannot wait, and love one another.
After his death, his body was cremated and his ashes were scattered according to Hindu tradition in the Ganges and Yamuna rivers in India. His final, truly posthumous album, Brainwashed, was completed by his son Donnie and Jeff Lynne in 2002.
Brainwashed had a quotation in the liner notes from the Bhagavad Gita emphasizing the immortal nature of the soul. "There never was a time when you or I did not exist, nor will there be any future when we shall cease to be."
And musically, it featured the Grammy-winning instrumental Marwah Blues, which perfectly synthesized his signature slide, playing by blending Hawaiian slack key guitar influences with traditional Indian modal structures.
Now we really need to dive deep into the technical skill that underpinned all of this cultural innovation, his guitar playing. Eric Clapton, his lifelong friend and collaborator, called Harrison clearly an innovator. He wasn't a flashy virtuoso, but his melodic intuition was unmatched.
His guitar work during the Beatles era, it was characterized by flexibility and elegance, not showmanship. He was known for a non-showy but incredibly solid, supportive lead guitar style. You can hear his influences: Chet Atkins, Carl Perkins, Chuck Berry in his rhythm playing.
His melodic lead solos are the key difference. Where his contemporaries like Clapton or Beck focused on speed and blues bombast, Harrison focused on fitting the song structurally.
Right.
Take his iconic solo on Something. It's highly controlled, beautifully phrased. It sounds almost like a vocal line, a perfect counterpoint to the song's melody, not a distraction from it.
Or the solo on Taxman, which is so angular and punchy.
Exactly. It's structurally unique and provides a direct counterpoint to the political lyrics. But he was also a technical innovator on rhythm guitar. During the Rubber Soul and Revolver eras, and prominently on Here Comes the Sun, he pioneered using a capo high up on the acoustic guitar neck.
Which gives that really bright, chiming sound.
It does. It shortened the strings and created this distinctive, sweet sound that helped define the acoustic textures of those albums.
He was also so instrumental in popularizing specific instruments. That 12-string Rickenbacker 36012 he used heavily between 64 and 65.
Which Melody Maker famously called the Beatles' secret weapon. It provided that instant, iconic, jangly sound that characterized their entry into the mid-60s. That guitar's unique wiring created a texture that launched 1,000 imitators.
Okay, but here is where his musical innovation gets truly profound. The slide guitar. We mentioned he picked it up in 1969. This wasn't just a new effect for him, it was the ultimate tool for merging East and West.
It was a conscious artistic synthesis. By using the slide, he could achieve the sustained microtonal inflections that define Indian-bowed instruments, like the sarangi, which is known for its voice-like quality, or the dilruba. He took a country and blues technique and repurposed it to speak the language of classical Indian music.
And that established his entire post-Beatles identity, didn't it? It defined the sonic space of All Things Must Pass and everything that came after.
Absolutely. And he was proficient beyond the guitar, too. He played bass on several Beatles tracks, like She Said, and was also a devoted ukulele player later in life.
And beyond his own playing, his production and collaboration credits are staggering.
Right.
He wasn't just creating his own work, he was actively fostering the careers of other people.
He produced early Apple Records artists like Doris Troy and the keyboardist Billy Preston. And he didn't stop there. He founded Dark Horse Records in '74, trying to recapture that collaborative idealism of early Apple.
He signed diverse acts, most notably his mentor Ravi Shankar and the British duo Splinter.
And he personally produced and played multiple instruments on Splinter's debut album, helping them get the label's first hit. It really reflected that generosity Eric Idle talked about, saying Harrison was extremely generous and he backs and supports all sorts of people that you'll never ever hear of.
His collaborations with his former bandmates were also really fruitful, especially with Ringo Starr. Between '71 and '73, Harrison co-wrote or produced 3 top 10 hits for Ringo.
It Don't Come Easy, Back Off Boogaloo, and Photograph. He was often the musical backbone for Ringo's early solo success. And of course, his slide guitar is all over John Lennon's Imagine album.
What's truly fascinating about his legacy is the complexity of those relationships with his bandmates. With John Lennon, the dynamic evolved from him being the young follower to sharing a spiritual bond, first over LSD and later through their pursuit of spiritual guides.
That bond was tested, but it endured. Harrison, reflecting on Lennon in 1974, gave that incredibly honest, nuanced description.
It's amazing.
John Lennon is a saint, and he's heavy-duty, and he's great, and I love him, but at the same time, he's such a bastard. But that's the great thing about him, you see. It reflects a deep, complex relationship where intense friction coexisted with profound affection.
And the relationship with Paul McCartney was maybe even more volatile. They met first on the school bus, shared a bedroom on those early Hamburg tours. Paul genuinely saw him as his baby brother.
But the creative friction intensified dramatically when McCartney began exerting dominant creative control in the mid to late '60s.
And that friction is why that, quote, Paul ruined me as a guitar player is so astonishing. But you know why he felt that way? Paul, as the director, would often dictate Harrison's guitar parts, or sometimes just play them himself. You can feel the tension in the Get Back film footage.
Absolutely. Yet even in 1974, after the split, Harrison admitted, I just know that whatever we've been through, there's always been something that's tied us together, that profound shared history and creative friction. It was the central tension that both powered their work and complicated things later.
But they maintained that complex, distant closeness right up to the end. I mean, the fact that Harrison passed away on a McCartney property says a lot.
It does.
His solo career earned him profound recognition. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice, with the Beatles in '88 and posthumously as a solo artist in 2004. He also got the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 2015.
And beyond the standard awards, the Billboard Century Award he got in 1992, it specifically recognized his critical role in laying the groundwork for the modern concept of world music and advancing society's comprehension of the spiritual power inherent in popular music. That, I think, summarizes his ultimate contribution.
So if we synthesize this entire deep dive, the musician, the seeker, the film producer, the philanthropist, Harrison's ultimate role was not that of a quiet side player. Not at all.
Far from it.
He was, in fact, the intellectual and spiritual engine that constantly demanded popular music look outward beyond its traditional pop structure toward global consciousness and deeper personal meaning. He was, ironically, one of the most culturally active and influential figures of the 20th century.
And his life was this constant tug-of-war between his innate idealism and the chaos and pain of the material world, the plagiarism suits, the betrayal by his film partner, the violence of the attack, the cancer that followed. This tension drove him toward physical acts of creation that doubled as spiritual refuges.
Which brings us to his relationship with his estate, Friar Park. It was 36 acres, and he spent decades meticulously renovating and cultivating the elaborate grounds. He saw the work as therapy, as a form of devotion.
His autobiography, I May Mine, is famously dedicated to gardeners everywhere. He saw gardening as an explicit, necessary escape.
He was so clear about why he retreated there. He once said, "Sometimes I feel like I'm actually on the wrong planet, and it's great when I'm in my garden, but the minute I go out the gate, I think, what the hell am I doing here?" The garden was his attempt to physically manifest inner peace.
It was.
So that raises an important question for you, the listener, to mull over. We know he was a prolific artist, but his final communicated message was, everything else can wait, but the search for God cannot wait. Given this, was his meticulous, disciplined dedication to cultivating the sanctuary of Friar Park, maintaining that vast manor and fighting back against the chaos of nature, was that as central to his life's ultimate work as the songs he created there?
The connection suggests that for George Harrison, the disciplined pursuit of creating and maintaining inner spiritual peace was, itself, an act of creation, an act equivalent in significance to writing a masterpiece like Something, or organizing the first massive benefit concert. His inner landscape needed cultivation just as much as his physical gardens and his musical genius.
Something to think about long after the music fades. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the magnificent world of George Harrison.